Rachel thought she'd buried her past with the last snowfall, but that night, the wind carried something different, a sound too deep to be thunder, too alive to be just the storm. A roar, low, distant, full of ache when she opened the door. She didn't see fire or fury. She saw a white lion, scarred but still standing, his eyes asking her to follow. What he led her to would change 3 lives and 1 broken town forever. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. The wind howled like something ancient that had lost its name, clawing its way down from the Cascade Mountains and sweeping across the quiet town of Klamath Falls, Oregon. Snow lashed sideways in thick, frantic curtains, blanketing the pine forests and swallowing the sound of the world. It was late January, and the town was all but closed in, its narrow mountain roads buried under feet of powder. Lights flickered behind frosted windows, but on the outer edge of the valley, where the pine trees thickened and civilization gave way to wilderness. One cabin stood alone, its roof sagging under the weight of snow, chimney coughing thin threads of smoke into the storm. Rachel Moore lived here, 43 years old, tall and wiry, with broad shoulders hardened from years on her feet. Rachel had the no-nonsense posture of someone who'd spent most of her life helping others while expecting nothing in return. Her dark, auburn hair was pulled into a tight, utilitarian bun, and fine lines framed her gray-blue eyes that rarely smiled. Once a trauma nurse in Sacramento, Rachel had walked away from hospitals and humanity after losing her husband, David, in a house fire 5 years ago, a fire she hadn't been able to reach in time since then. Her words had become fewer, her laughter extinct. She chose silence over sympathy, pine over pavement. In this cabin, she kept a strict rhythm, splitting wood, maintaining her generator, reading old medical journals, and occasionally driving into town for supplies, always alone. That night, the wind rattled the shutters with a fury that spoke of warnings. Rachel sat by the fireplace, tending the flame with practiced ease. Her flannel sleeves rolled to her elbows and a mug of black coffee cradled in her calloused hands. But just as she leaned forward to add a new log, she heard it. Not the wind, not the cracking trees. A sound different, low, resonant, and alive. It was a roar, distant, but not imagined, not a bear, not a cougar, something else. She stood up slowly, body already moving before her mind caught up. She slipped into her snow gear, thick parka, insulated gloves, worn boots laced to the knee. Her breath curled in the frozen air as she stepped out onto the porch. Visibility was poor, barely a few yards, but the sound came again, closer now, a deep, rolling growl that seemed to rise from the forest floor itself. Rachel grabbed her flashlight and headed into the storm, less than a mile away. Hidden between the folds of the hillside, a silver SUV lay on its side, half submerged in snow. Its taillights, dimmed and flickering, offered the only evidence of its presence. The wreckage was jagged. Branches from a broken pine clawed across the rear window, and the front windshield was spiderwebbed with cracks. Snow had piled in through the driver's side door, which hung open like a broken jaw. Rachel spotted it after half an hour of trudging through waist-high snow, but she didn't find it alone. Standing beside the wreckage, one massive paw pressing into the powder, was a creature that didn't belong to this part of the world. A lion, not just any lion, but white as the snowfall around it. The creature stood still, muscles taut beneath its thick, winter-dulled coat, its mane faintly ruffled by the wind. One shoulder bore an old gash, half-healed but jagged, like it had torn free from something meant to restrain it. Its breath steamed into the night, eyes gold and unblinking. Rachel froze, heart thudding in her ears, but the lion didn't move to attack. Instead, it turned its head toward her with startling calmness, then looked back at the car, and then it let out a low rumble, one that didn't threaten but pointed. She understood, keeping her distance. Rachel moved toward the SUV, skirting the lion's watchful gaze, inside. She found a woman, mid-20s, dark brown hair matted with blood, her body slumped forward over the wheel. Pulse faint. Lips cracked from the cold. Her name, Rachel would later learn, was Erin Blake, in the back seat, beneath a half-torn fleece blanket, was a newborn. The baby girl was barely breathing, cheeks frost-bitten at the edges, her tiny hands clenched into trembling fists. Rachel scooped her up, cradling the child against her body. Heart pounding. "Stay with me," she whispered, her old instincts rising like muscle memory. "You're not going out tonight, with no time to return twice." She moved quickly, lifting Erin into her arms with difficulty, the snow pulling at her legs with every step. The lion trailed behind, padding silently, never getting too close but never vanishing. It didn't lead, it guarded, back at the cabin. Rachel kicked open the door with her boot and set both mother and child near the fire. She moved fast, layering the baby in wool, heating formula, cleaning the frostbite from tiny fingers. Erin's condition was stable but delicate. Bandages wrapped her head, and Rachel administered fluids using her old medical gear. The lion never entered, but it stayed just outside, visible through the window, curled beneath the porch like a sentinel, in the house next door, barely visible through the storm-blurred pines. 8-year-old Tyler Quinn stood at his bedroom window, breath fogging the glass. He was a slender boy with freckled cheeks and unruly brown hair, eyes always wide with the kind of quiet anxiety that made teachers worry and neighbors dismiss him as sensitive. After his parents' divorce, Tyler stopped speaking, except to his grandmother. But that night, something changed. He saw a lion, massive and ghost-white, resting beneath Rachel's porch light instead of fear. Curiosity bloomed in his chest, his hand lifted to the glass, as if to greet it, and though no one saw it. The lion lifted its head once, just enough to meet the boy's gaze through the swirling snow. Outside, the storm raged on, unknowing and uncaring, but in the 2 cabins on the edge of Klamath Falls, something rare had taken root, the beginning of survival, the beginning of a bond, and somewhere in the darkness, a roar echoed again, not in fear but in promise. Morning in the woods above Klamath Falls came like a breath held too long. The storm had broken sometime before dawn, leaving behind a silence that pressed against the trees, thick and heavy as wet wool. Snow hung in great heaps from every branch and rooftop. The whole forest blanketed in a stillness that made even the wind seem reverent. Inside Rachel Moore's cabin, the fire had burned low but steady, its orange glow flickering across the worn floorboards and the wool blankets tucked around the child who now slept in the wicker basket beside it. Rachel sat on a stool nearby, sleeves rolled, fingers gently dabbing balm onto the infant's frost-bitten hands. Her touch was firm but tender, the kind of touch that remembered too much loss to allow for carelessness. The baby girl's skin had taken on more color overnight, still pale, but no longer alarmingly so. Her breath came soft, rhythmic, the rise and fall of someone still fighting to belong to this world. Across the room, Erin Blake stirred on the couch. Rachel turned her head. "You're awake," she said simply. Erin's eyes blinked slowly open. She was in her late 20s, with sharp cheekbones and long lashes that framed brown eyes still dulled by pain and exhaustion. The bandage around her forehead had been changed overnight. Her hair, tangled and still damp in parts, clung to her temples. She tried to sit up, winced, then stopped. "You shouldn't move," Rachel added, "cracked rib, mild concussion. You'll heal, but not today." Erin's voice rasped out, "The baby." Rachel glanced toward the basket, stable, stronger than she looks. A moment passed before Erin asked, "You gave her a name?" Rachel hesitated, then, without looking up from the balm jar, she said, "I've been calling her Lily Snow, just for now." Something in Erin's expression broke. Part pain, part gratitude, part grief. "That was my mother's name, Lily." Rachel finally looked at her. "Then it fits?" They said nothing for a while. The quiet between them wasn't awkward. It had weight, meaning. In Rachel's world. Silence was its own kind of honesty. Outside. Footsteps crunched across fresh snow. Rachel's head turned toward the sound instinctively, but she didn't stand. She already knew who it was. Solace had returned. The white lion approached the porch without hesitation, his massive paws pressing deliberate shapes into the untouched powder. His mane shimmered slightly in the morning light, tangled with frozen needles and melting crystals. Rachel opened the door slowly. Solace stopped 3 feet away, exhaled once, and lowered himself onto the porch. He curled his body around the edge of the cabin like a statue chiseled from ice and breath. He didn't look at her. He didn't have to. Rachel closed the door again. He followed us. Erin murmured, "No," Rachel said, settling back onto her stool. He led us. Later that morning. Rachel stepped out briefly to fetch water from the pump near the tree line. It was there. Across the field of snow that separated her cabin from the neighboring lot, that she saw a small glint of color near her steps. She bent down, a yellow toy truck, half buried in the snow. She looked up instinctively toward the Quinn house, a pale brown building with a steep roof and smoke just beginning to curl from its chimney. It sat farther back, behind 2 pines bent low from the storm. No movement in the windows, just faint light. Rachel said nothing but carried the toy truck inside. She placed it gently on the edge of the porch beside Solace, who opened one eye, sniffed it once, then returned to his vigil. Meanwhile, in that house next door, Tyler Quinn stood just beyond the curtain of the kitchen window, 8 years old, wiry, pale, and perpetually barefoot inside the house. Tyler had the kind of face that looked like it was always mid-thought, since his parents' divorce. He'd lived with his grandmother, a quiet woman named Mrs. Helen Quinn, who wore long cardigans, baked lemon bars year-round, and spoke in short sentences wrapped in kindness. Tyler didn't talk much, not since the court hearings and the months of yelling, but this morning. He watched the white lion from the kitchen window, hugging a blue blanket to his chest. He had left the truck there early, before sunrise, when his grandmother was still asleep. He hadn't told her, but he didn't feel guilty. Something about the lion called to him, not in words, but in presence. It hadn't roared again. It hadn't even growled. But when their eyes met through the snow the night before, something inside Tyler had clicked loose. Not fear, not awe, just quiet understanding. He turned away from the window and went to retrieve another object from the shelf. A piece of bread wrapped in foil. He folded it slowly, placed it inside a Ziploc bag, and set it beside his backpack at the door. Outside, Solace sniffed the toy again and, for a moment, lifted his head toward the trees. Inside Rachel's cabin, Erin's voice had grown steadier. She was sitting upright now, a mug of warm broth between her hands. "You're not going to ask, are you?" she said suddenly. Rachel looked up from a pile of folded baby clothes. "Ask what? Why I was out there, why I was running." Rachel didn't answer. Erin let out a weak laugh. "God, I don't know if that makes you kind or cold." "It means I wait until people are ready," Rachel replied. "And until they're not bleeding?" A pause. Then Erin said, "I worked for a logistics firm, Northline Intermodal, out of Boise, data entry, mostly. I started noticing numbers that didn't make sense. Shipments marked as medical but routed to private addresses. Deliveries logged under names that didn't exist." Rachel listened. Expression unreadable. I flagged it, quietly, thought I was being careful. Next thing I know, my apartment was broken into, my hard drives gone, no fingerprints, just a note. She closed her eyes, said if I asked more questions, my daughter wouldn't grow up. Rachel inhaled once. "So, you ran." Erin nodded. "And your husband?" "There's no we, just her and me, always was." Rachel folded the last blanket. "I've got a secure box under the floorboards. You'll put whatever you have in there. I only grabbed one thing," Erin said. She reached into her coat, still drying near the stove, and pulled out a crumpled envelope sealed with medical tape. Shipping records. Some printed, some handwritten. I don't know if they're enough. Rachel took them without comment. That evening, just before dusk, Rachel found another item near the porch, a crayon drawing wrapped in clear plastic. It showed a lion with big round eyes, a baby in a basket, and a small boy watching from behind a tree. Scrawled at the bottom, in crooked block letters, "For the lion who doesn't roar." She didn't smile, not quite, but her lips softened inside. Lily Snow stirred in her sleep. Erin whispered a lullaby Rachel didn't recognize, something soft, southern. Probably her mother's, outside. Solace shifted, ears twitching as if catching a sound no human could hear, in the trees beyond. A boy watched from the shadows. He wouldn't speak of it. Not yet, but for the first time in a long while. Tyler Quinn didn't feel invisible. The sky over Klamath Falls had turned brittle with cold, the kind of winter air that bit straight through wool and skin alike. The snow, though less furious than days before, still fell in light, persistent flurries, painting the forest in a haze of muted white. Morning came slow, crawling over the ridgelines in silvery bands that struggled to penetrate the heavy clouds. The trees creaked, not from wind, but from weight, ice-laced boughs bending under frozen burdens. Inside Rachel's cabin, the fire snapped softly, casting amber light against the floor. Rachel was in the kitchen, rolling gauze with methodical care. Her movements were efficient, practiced, not rushed, not distracted, but prepared, instinct, the kind you didn't unlearn. Erin sat upright now, pale but lucid. Lily Snow slept in her arms, nestled in Rachel's old ranger jacket like it belonged to her. She stopped crying again. Erin murmured, "I think she knows we're safe." Rachel nodded without looking up. Babies can sense more than we give them credit for. The day might have continued in quiet peace, but at 10:14 a.m., everything changed. It began with Solace. The lion stood from his usual place beside the porch and let out a low, guttural growl. Not loud, not angry, just precise, alert. His head tilted toward the slope leading up to the cabin. Rachel froze. She crossed the room in 3 quick strides and lifted the old binoculars hanging by the window. Down the trail, half obscured by trees and snowfall, was movement, a figure, human, male, alone. He wasn't trudging like a hiker. He was walking with confidence, as if the snow was just a detail, as if he already knew where he was going. Rachel turned to Aaron. "You and Lily, downstairs, now!" Aaron's eyes widened. "What? Don't argue." Rachel opened the trapdoor behind the stove, revealing a steep set of wooden steps that led into the root cellar, converted years ago into a storm shelter, lined with crates, lanterns, and a cot. "Take this." She handed Aaron a thermos, a blanket, and a flashlight. "Don't open the hatch unless it's my voice." Aaron obeyed. Clutching Lily close, she descended quickly, her breath shallow, her knuckles white around the baby's carrier. Rachel closed the trap door, slid the wool rug back over it, and turned toward the front door. Solace stood on the porch like a statue, ears pricked, breath steady. The knock came, 3 light taps, then one heavier. Rachel's hand brushed the handle of the hunting knife clipped to her belt. She opened the door just enough to see the man who stood there looked to be in his early 40s. Tall, wiry, wearing a thick parka flecked with snow. His hair was sandy brown, short, neatly trimmed. A few days' worth of stubble coated his face, but not enough to hide the sharp angle of his jaw. His eyes were blue, too pale, too calm, like glass. "I'm looking for someone," he said smoothly. "Young woman. Traveling alone, driving a silver SUV. Might have passed this way before the storm." Rachel didn't blink. "No one's come through." He tilted his head, as if amused by the deflection. "You sure? This is the only trail open in 3 miles. That's a lot of smoke for an empty cabin." Rachel didn't move. Solace stepped forward once, his paw hitting the porch with weight. The man's eyes flicked toward him, his mouth twitched, but not in fear. "Recognition. That's an unusual animal to have," he said lightly. "Not exactly native." As Rachel kept her voice level. "He wandered here during the storm, same as you, except he doesn't ask questions he already knows the answers to." For a moment, nothing moved. Then the man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Well," he said, "if you do see someone, tell her friend is looking." He turned and walked back the way he came, boots crunching slow and even. Rachel watched until he disappeared beyond the trees. Solace didn't budge. Only after the quiet returned did Rachel lift the trapdoor and call Aaron up. That was him. Aaron said quietly as she climbed out. Lily pressed tight to her chest. "That's the man who left the warning before I ran." Rachel nodded that evening while Aaron rested and Lily slept again. Rachel stepped out to chop firewood. Solace remained nearby, silent and still, but his eyes never left the slope and across the clearing, just at the edge of the woods near the Quinn property. Tyler stood beneath a pine tree, a book in his hand. It was the first time he had dared to come so close. His grandmother thought he was inside drawing. He wasn't supposed to be out. But something had pulled him here, some need to see the white lion again with his own eyes. He held the book tight to his chest, an old library copy of Call of the Wild. Pages dog-eared and scribbled with quiet notes. Solace turned his head. Slowly. No growl, no rise, just a meeting of eyes. Tyler's breath caught. He knelt, still holding the book, and whispered, "Hi." He hadn't spoken aloud in weeks, maybe months, not even to his grandmother, but the word came easy here. Solace stepped forward, just one slow, cautious step into the snow. The boy's lip trembled, but he didn't move away. "You're not like other things," he said. "You're not loud." Then, as if the act of speaking had loosened something inside, Tyler opened the book and read only a line, a few soft words about wolves and silence and being lost. Solace listened. His tail flicked once. Tyler smiled, not big, but real, and somewhere behind the window. Rachel watched, one hand resting against the glass, her eyes not on the boy or the lion, but on the distance between them. A distance that had just disappeared. The cold had sharpened again overnight. It wasn't the biting, storm-born chill of a few days prior, but something more cunning, thin and quiet, like a blade pressed flat against the skin. Klamath Falls lay blanketed in brittle stillness, pine branches frozen mid-bend, and the surface of the snow glistening like glass. The world didn't creak or groan anymore. It simply waited. Rachel stood at the edge of the woods behind her cabin, her boots buried to the ankles in ice-crusted powder. Her breath plumed white as she adjusted the strap of her parka. Solace had led her this far, half a mile past the boundary she normally patrolled. He moved with quiet certainty, his massive form weaving through the trees without disturbing a single pine cone. When he stopped, Rachel knew they had arrived. The clearing was unremarkable at first glance, just a dip in the terrain where snow had gathered deeper. But Solace began pawing at a mound near a bent cedar, each swipe methodical, like memory driving him. Rachel knelt beside him, brushing back snow with her gloved hands until the sharp edge of scorched metal scraped her palm. A barrel, rusted, half-melted, its rim charred black. Burn barrel. She grabbed a nearby branch and used it to pry the lid loose. Inside, half-ashes fluttered in the air, disturbed by her movement, but at the bottom, near the edge where snowmelt hadn't yet reached, sat something intact. A folder, waterlogged, edges curled, but the papers inside were real, tangible, typed manifests, routing logs, annotated lists with strange code names, and one page, a printed record with 2 red-circled names, Aaron Blake and Simon Darrow. Rachel's pulse ticked in her throat. Simon Darrow. She knew that name. A park ranger from Idaho, gone missing last fall after raising red flags about restricted cargo being rerouted through wilderness zones. The reports had been vague. Official channels said he was lost during trail monitoring, but his disappearance had always felt off. She stood slowly, folder clutched to her chest. Solace rose beside her, his white mane catching the faint light filtering through the overcast sky. She looked at him. "You knew this was here?" She said softly. He didn't respond. He didn't have to. Back at the cabin, Aaron sat bundled in a quilt near the fire, Lily sleeping against her shoulder. She looked better. Her color had returned. Her hands steadier, but her eyes still carried the tension of someone being hunted. Rachel laid the folder on the table. Aaron stared at it in silence for a long time before whispering. "I was right." Rachel nodded. "You're not the only one who tried to stop it, but you might be the only one left." That night, after Aaron had gone to bed and Lily was nestled beside her, Rachel pulled an old radio set from beneath the pantry floorboards. It was dented, military grade, and dusty, but it still worked. She turned the frequency dial slowly until the static cleared into a voice. Eliza Quinn. Rachel exhaled, a strange warmth creeping into her chest. "It's Rachel." A pause. Then, "Damn, thought you were off the map. I need you to run a name. Redstone Logistics, formerly operating as Northline Intermodal and Simon Darrow. If that doesn't flag something, we're already too late." There was another pause. "Longer this time. You in trouble?" "Not yet. But a woman and her baby I'm sending photos. I have documents. You trust your line, I trust you." "All right," Eliza said, voice clipped but steady. "Send what you have. I'll go around the chain." Eliza Quinn had been Rachel's partner 15 years ago when they were both working backcountry rescue. Eliza was shorter, with a dry wit and sharp dark eyes that missed nothing. Her past had hardened her, but not bittered her. She had stayed in the system after Rachel left it, became a state officer with a specialty in transport compliance. If anyone could follow a trail this cold, it was Eliza, as Rachel uploaded the files. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of moving again, of taking action after years of stillness. When the last file transmitted, she closed the laptop and leaned back in her chair. Solace, ever silent, was curled at the door. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty. Across the field, in the smaller home with chipped blue shutters and a leaning porch rail, Tyler Quinn sat cross-legged on the rug of his grandmother's den. He was drawing again, lines thick and childlike, but precise in their intention. The page showed a lion beside a cabin, a tiny baby in a basket, and a woman with brown hair holding a flashlight. Tyler labeled them in pencil: Solace, Lily, and Rachel. Mrs. Helen Quinn watched him from the kitchen doorway, in her late 60s. She was a soft-spoken woman with silver hair tied in a loose bun, thick framed glasses, and a gentle limp from an old hip injury. She had raised Tyler alone since the divorce, always patient, never pushing. Tonight, though, something in her moved her to speak. "You've been out more this week than all of last month combined," she said, her voice kind. Tyler didn't look up. "And you've been leaving food, toys." He hesitated. "He's not like other things," he said quietly. Helen stepped into the room, sitting beside him. "The lion," Tyler nodded. "He listens, like he hears even when you don't say stuff out loud." Helen looked at the drawing, then at her grandson's small hands clenched tightly around the crayon. "You've missed having someone like that, haven't you?" A nod. "Do you want him to stay?" Another nod. This one came with wet eyes. Helen reached over, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "Then we'll help him stay however we can." Tyler turned to her. "Eyes wide, really?" She smiled. "I've always trusted your heart more than anyone's voice." Back at the cabin, Rachel stood on the porch once more, eyes scanning the forest's edge. Snow had stopped. Stars blinked through clouds. Solace lay beside her, his breath steady, golden eyes fixed on the dark beyond. "They'll come again," Rachel said. Solace didn't move. "But next time, we'll be ready." It was a Thursday morning when the wind changed. The bite of winter that had clung so fiercely to the trees around Klamath Falls finally softened, giving way to a breeze that smelled faintly of thawing earth and pine sap. Patches of old snow still clung to the shadows beneath the evergreens, but the sun, pale and stubborn, had begun to assert itself again. Small birds returned to the branches, chirping hesitantly, like testing their courage. Rachel Moore stood on the back porch, a pair of gardening gloves in one hand and a small sapling in the other. The cherry blossom was barely more than a branch with promise, slender, root-bound, and waiting. She knelt and began to dig, her movements sure, patient. The earth was still hard in places, but it yielded beneath her shovel, behind her. Solace lay in his usual place, breath deep and slow, mane ruffled by the breeze. The white lion had not left since the day he arrived. He had, in many ways, become part of the cabin's rhythm, the protector, the watcher, the quiet presence that reminded them all that something extraordinary had passed through their lives, inside. The air buzzed with low conversation. Erin Blake stood by the table, her long dark hair pulled back into a tidy braid. Her face was leaner now, but healthy, with the color returned to her cheeks. She wore a simple green hoodie, jeans, and boots she had borrowed from Rachel. Lily was asleep in the carrier on her chest, mouth slightly open, fingers curled around the soft lining. Next to her stood Darla Sloan, a relocation coordinator with the Federal Witness Protection Program. She was in her early 50s, with short-cropped silver hair and the compact, upright stance of someone who had spent time in uniform. Her voice was clipped but not unkind, and her eyes scanned every corner of the room like a second nature. "The new address is set," Darla said, flipping a folder closed. "We'll move by dusk. There's a short orientation once we arrive. But after that, you decide how to begin." Erin nodded, her voice low. "Will it be safe?" "As safe as we can make it," Darla said. "You won't be alone." Rachel entered through the back door, brushing dirt from her gloves. "Everything ready." Erin turned, eyes softening. "As ready as I'll ever be." They stood for a long moment, the kind of pause that holds more than words can say. Then Erin stepped forward, reaching into the carrier to adjust Lily's blanket. "You saved our lives," she said, voice trembling. "You and him." She looked down at Solace through the window. "I don't know how to thank you." Rachel offered a small smile. "Then just live better than they wanted you to." Erin gave a teary laugh. "I will. And if someday I come back..." Rachel nodded. "Then don't knock. Just walk in, outside." The van waited. Darla opened the door, stepping back as Erin turned for one last look at the cabin, the pines, and the great white lion lying beneath them. Solace lifted his head just once, as if to say goodbye. Tyler Quinn stood at the edge of the clearing, bundled in his red jacket, holding something behind his back. Rachel had invited him over that morning, sensing that this chapter needed to end with him, too. He walked slowly, his cheeks flushed not just from the wind but from the weight of the moment. As the van disappeared down the snowy trail, Tyler stepped forward and held out the picture he had drawn, neatly framed now in wood. Rachel took it gently and smiled. The drawing showed Solace curled protectively beside a basket, Lily asleep inside, stars above them and trees bending like guardians. At the bottom, in blocky, uneven handwriting, the title read, "Some Lions Roar, Some Just Wait." Rachel knelt, brushing a loose strand of hair from Tyler's eyes. "It's beautiful." Tyler shrugged. "He's not like the lions in books. He doesn't roar. He just knows things. He's not the only one," Rachel said softly. Tyler looked up at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think he'll stay?" Rachel glanced at Solace, who had returned to his spot beneath the porch. "If he does, it's because he's already chosen us." Later that afternoon, Rachel returned to the cherry tree she'd planted. She placed a small stone at its base, etched with a single word, "For those who ran, and those who stood to catch them." Tyler helped her smooth the soil, his hands dirty, his eyes shining, that night. As the stars spread wide across the sky and the last frost of winter melted into the edges of the cabin roof, Rachel sat on the porch with Solace curled beside her. Tyler was asleep inside, curled in the big chair with a blanket around his shoulders and a book in his lap. Rachel looked out toward the trees. Everything felt different now, not louder, not busier, but fuller. The kind of full that comes after silence, the kind of peace that's earned, and somewhere far away, in a town with a new name and a clean address, Erin Blake would one day tell her daughter about a cabin in the woods, a woman who didn't ask for thanks, and a white lion who never roared but never left. Spring had not yet fully arrived, but in that quiet place on the ridge. It had begun. Sometimes. The miracles we need don't come with noise or fire. They don't arrive with thunder in the sky or angels in shining armor. Sometimes, they come quietly, like a white lion in the snow, a stranger who opens her door, or a child who finds the courage to speak again. God doesn't always work through the loud and the obvious. More often, He moves through the stillness, through the people and creatures who simply show up and stay. Solace didn't roar. He didn't chase or command. He waited, he listened, and in doing so, he helped heal what the world had tried to break. In our daily lives, it's easy to overlook these kinds of miracles. We rush past the quiet blessings, like someone holding a door, or a child reaching for your hand. But maybe today is a chance to slow down and notice. Maybe someone near you just needs your silence, your presence, or your courage to stand beside them when no one else will. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment to let others know they're not alone. Subscribe to join a community of stories that remind us of God's quiet work in the world. May the Lord bless you and everyone you love with courage, peace, and the kind of faith that walks quietly through storms. Type Amen in the comments if you believe that even the quietest lives can carry the loudest miracles.